Thank you for being here. She watches on Facebook. Isn't that wonderful? If you lived here, you could stay. See? Need to move here, right? Okay, so good morning. It's so wonderful to see you guys. So wonderful to be out of pajamas, as I said earlier. That is not fun. I was sharing with some of y'all that when I'm sick, I'm just whiny. And it's like I forget. I was telling somebody, I forget my practice. It was Diane. I was saying, I forget my practice, right? Because I just whine. I complain because I want to read. I want to work, and I can't. And then what set in was deep compassion. Deep compassion. And the compassion was, wow, people wake up and they don't feel good. And that may happen for them for years. They don't feel good. And I had so much compassion for those that just woke up not feeling good. And I thought, okay, I can do this. It's a week. I can do this. I got this. So anyway, so this morning, I want to share and talk about awe. And last week, thank you, Terry Olson. There you are, Terry Olson, who I texted her on Wednesday and said, hey, can you give the talk? And she immediately said, yes. Is that a gift, right? Yes. And her talk was such a gift and such a blessing. And first of all, she did talk about awe because music, that is one of the things that gives us that sense of something outside of us that connects us with one another, right? And the other thing she said that is so important, such a deep part of our practice, and that is I can learn differently. Thank you for sharing that, Terry. I can learn differently. And that's why I chose this idea of awe, because the thing is as you know, when you have a spiritual practice, you are on this ceaseless journey of growth and learning, right? And life is still happening in the midst of all of it, because that is what helps us grow. I mean, that's just what helps us grow. All that comes to us is what helps us grow. And the growth is about having an awareness of the awareness, right? So the thing about awe that I was so inspired by, which I told you I listened to a podcast by Tara Brach, who's a clinical psychologist and a Buddhist, and she had, and I shared with y'all the book, just a few, Dacher Keltner, and he's also a psychologist. And what he studies is the science of human emotion. Isn't that beautiful? So what he does is that he tracks what emotion does in the body. What it does scientifically, what it does in the body. And what he says is that this idea of awe can actually transform us. It actually helps us grow. It actually helps us heal when we feel awe. So awe is that feeling, sometimes it feels like that elusive feeling, but it's that feeling you have when you stand in front of the ocean. That happens for me, right? When you stand in front of a huge tree. I've shared with y'all how many times trees have saved my life. It happens at the birth of a child. And how many of you have witnessed that? Yeah, that's awe. It happens when you witness the death of a loved one. Who's witnessed that? Yeah, that's also that feeling of awe. And the thing about the feeling of awe is that it takes you outside of yourself. It takes you outside of yourself, and that's obviously, as you know, the spiritual practice, to know that you belong to something greater than the small self, right? And it even feels good when you know you belong to something greater, does it not? Because, I mean, getting stuck in the self, it's like, God, you bore me sometimes, right? Anybody else feel that? Like, I am bored with this. I need something outside of this. So that's what we're going to talk about is awe. So how does he study awe? He and his collaborators gathered 2,600 personal narratives when people talked about awe. 2,600. And he categorized them into 8 different wonders of awe. Now, I just want to share a couple with y'all today. Moral beauty and the spiritual and religious experience. That's what I'm sharing. And why did he do this? He did this because he lost his younger brother to cancer. And his younger brother, they were very close. Even into adulthood, they would hike together. They were adventurous. They lived, a meaningful life together. And he said when he lost him, he just had this, he called it a Rolf-sized hole in his life. And so he fell into depression, he fell into grief, and just couldn't get outside of it. And at the same time, being a professor at UC Berkeley, a psychologist, and he realized, he just heard this voice, and it was find awe. And so that's what inspired this work, and that's what inspired this study. So what I want to ask you, and what I'm hoping is that you leave here with another way of practicing, another way of learning, another way of growing, another way of transforming. And so I'm going to ask you a question, and you can respond. Where do you find awe? Puppy. Nature. Kitties. Yeah. Anything else? Animals? Family. Church. I love it. That's awesome. Thank you. I'm saying thank you. I hope that means, I hope I have something to do with that. Of course, I'm assuming I do, but maybe I don't, Travis. Church, yeah. What's that? Sunset. Yeah. Obviously, it's that thing that takes you outside of yourself, right? And he says the beautiful thing is, like, as you know, it doesn't cost money. Isn't that awesome? When Starbucks coffees cost like $8, right? It's nice to know we can just go experience something and it doesn't cost money, not to mention it's healthy for us. It's good for us. So when you have a chance, or at least actually right now, just even get quiet with yourself and say, when do I feel awe? When do I feel awe? And I ask you to do that because that's what I want your practice to be for the week, is just those experiences of awe in your life. And just seek them out. And that's an easy homework, right? That's not hard. You don't have to read a book. You don't have to write a summary, Shara. She tells me she owes me a summary. Which she doesn't, by the way. Yeah, so that's your homework. And I'm hoping in this talk it's going to give you ideas of other ways of experiencing awe. So, as I said, he devoted his career to mapping emotions with science. And they began to find awe in the lab. Isn't that interesting? They found it in the lab. And so it's that feeling, that physical awareness when we get tears in our eyes. That clicks us in. Oh, I'm feeling awe. When we have chills. Or when you stand before something and all you can say is, whoa. It's all you can say, or wow. That's the feeling of awe. That's what it is. And and he says that when people talk about awe, what they say is they've discovered something sacred. They've discovered that they're moved by spirit. And it is an antidote to our overstressed times and our overheated times. Isn't that beautiful? And what he suspected, he and his collaborators suspected, is that feelings of awe may reduce inflammation in the body. Isn't that extraordinary? He said that when we have inflammation, it's produced by the immune system, and it arises in response to chronic threat, rejection, and loneliness. And what awe is an antithesis to these social threats that cause the release of pro-inflammatory proteins. Isn't that amazing? Just experiencing awe. That's it. You don't even have to take like a drug. Just that. Just that. So obviously what it does is it transforms the way we think, the way we act, and then here's what it does. It quiets the nagging, self-critical, overbearing, status-conscious voice of ourself, our ego. Amen. Who wants a break from that? Amen. Right? And that's what I would hope to do with the meditation, is recognize that the self that we think is the self isn't the self, right? That self isn't our self. We think it is. It's a very, what's the word? I don't want to say conniving. I don't want to say that. But it pulls us in. What's that? Convincing. I like that word better. It pulls us in, right? But that's not the self. Awe empowers us to collaborate with others, to open our mind to wonder. It brings us joy, meaning, community. And the thing is that when we have joy, meaning, and community, what happens? We are healthier in mind and body. It's that simple, y'all. It's that simple. So the answer is keep coming back, right? Keep coming here. That's the answer. Keep coming here. So I want to share the two places. He did 8 wonders, but I want to share 2, and that's moral beauty and religious and spiritual experiences. Those are the 2 that I want to focus on. Moral beauty is when we witness people being kind to others. Isn't that beautiful? That brings in awe when we see that. Think about that. Moral beauty is when you see somebody overcome something difficult. Moral beauty is when you see people having courage. And it doesn't have to be these big things. It can even be small things. I think about my son. I have a dog I don't talk about often. She's a little bit of a thorn on my side, and I do love her, but her name is Piper. And she has bladder issues, so she tends to go to the bathroom everywhere. I'm sorry to tell y'all that, but she does. And then she kind of gets upset stomach and will just have all kinds of issues. So I remember one time my son and his friend were we got home from school actually, and Piper had been in her crate, and she just made a mess of it. She had a stomach issue. Like, it was bad. It was bad. And I had to get her out of the crate. Tom was out of town. He's always out of the town when these things happen, y'all. Every single time he's out of town. Had to get her from the crate upstairs. Theo, do you remember this? Take her downstairs into the garage. And my son and his friend, I think they were like in 3rd grade, and I just saw it. And I was just, you get that feeling like, oh my gosh, overwhelmed. And these 2 young boys just helped me. Like, it's okay. We can help you. It's okay. And there's that feeling of like, and I can't tell you how many times Theo has done that. When I've gotten frustrated with her, and he's like, she can't help it. That's what he says to me. She can't help it. I said, but I can't do this anymore. He's like, but you can't give up on her. I'm like, but what am I supposed to learn from this? And you know what he says to me? Perseverance. That's what you're supposed to learn, perseverance. And he'll say to me, what can I do? Do you want me to have a cup of tea with you? That's what he does. Because that's my love language. Any of y'all say to me, can I have a cup of tea with you? I'm going to love you forever. Yes, you can have a cup of tea with me. And we sat there, and I remembered, what is this lesson that this dog is teaching me? One of the things is we go through these times of absolute frustration, and as a family, we connect and we support one another. And that's beautiful, right? If that's what Piper's here to teach us, that we can go through the messy carpet and whatever she brings and still want to love one another. I know, I look at my spouse, he's like, I don't know that I can go there. So that's moral beauty, when we're kind to one another and it takes us out of ourselves. That's moral beauty. Dr. Keltner, he talks about moral beauty, and he gives this amazing quote that I have to share with you guys because it's one of all of our, I'm sure, favorite authors, and that's Toni Morrison. And I have to share this quote. I've got to put on my glasses. Over time, these last 40 years, I have become more and more invested in making sure acts of goodness, however casual or deliberate or misapplied, produce language. Allowing goodness its own speech, does not annihilate evil, but it does allow me to signify my own understanding of goodness, the acquisition of self-knowledge, allowing goodness its own speech. Isn't that beautiful? And so what he did, because he believes in allowing goodness its own speech, and he believes in moral beauty, he believes in restorative justice. Restorative justice. And so that belief in restorative justice is what took him to San Quentin, which is a level 2 prison. And he's very aware that the majority of the people held in that prison are people of color. And he's very aware of that. And so he knew he had a role, and they're already in that prison. There's a restorative justice group for inmates. And out of 4,500, like 250 participate in this group. And so he went, and part of that restorative justice is basically for people to treat one another and know that they are kind, that there's an inherent kindness. And no matter what they've done, they will grow from that, and they will transform, and they will be kind to one another. And they have these talking circles, and so he went to these talking circles. And at first he felt, who am I, this white privileged man, to be asking people, and he called them, which I love, it's so honoring. He didn't call them prisoners, he called them the men in blue. Who am I to ask them what awe is? And he did. And they said, reading the Quran, Jesus, visits from my daughter, looking at nature. Very similar to what we've said, right? And that, if anything, reminded him the importance of awe and the importance of practicing it and honoring it. And so he sat in one of his last visits, he sat next to a man whose name was Chris, and he was a white man, and he was a skinhead. He was a Nazi, basically. And he used to be violent towards people of color. And so he was in the talking circle, and he was talking about this. And keep in mind, he's a white man speaking to the majority of men of color, telling them, I used to beat people of color with a bat. And then the leader stood up and went over to him and hugged him and told him how courageous it was of him to say that. He's growing his hair. He does not want to be associated with the other skinheads that are there at San Quentin. And he's removing tattoos from himself one by one. Is that not beautiful? Change, growth, transformation. It's always possible, right? We can never give up on that. And so at the end of every single one of their talking circles, they say together, they stand up together and they say, I believe that violence is not a solution to any problem. I believe that every person is endowed with a sacred dignity. I believe that every person is capable of changing, healing, and being restored. I pledge to respect the dignity of every person. I pledge to overcome violence with love and compassion. I pledge to accompany and support any affected by crime on their healing journey. I pledge to be an instrument of restoration, of reconciliation, and forgiveness. That's gorgeous. Make me an instrument of thy peace, right? Make me an instrument of thy peace. We're not here to give up on people, right? We're here to support. We're here to love. So the other thing he says is religious and spiritual experiences. And mystical awe, he found, originates in inexplicable experiences that transcend the expectations of the default self, right? It's when we come outside of that. And it's, sometimes you don't want to share it with people, right? You feel like, well, that's embarrassing. They're going to think I'm crazy when I tell them that God spoke to me, right? That's how you feel. But there are people that share it. We know that one of them is, y'all know the story about Bernadette, right? Bernadette in the 19th century near Lourdes, France. She had 18 visions of the Virgin Mary in the darkness of a cave, and it led her to the healing waters. The healing waters that 5 million a year make a pilgrimage to go to extraordinary, to experience the healing. He writes that when you have these mystical experiences, you feel the presence of God. Raise your hand if that's happened, right? That's most of us. He talked about when he lost his brother, he would feel his brother's hand on his shoulder. I remember for years when I would wash dishes, I would feel my father's presence behind me. It's just a beautiful feeling, right? That's the mystical. That's the mystical. And that's why we're here to practice that. And what happens to the body when you feel that mystical? You feel goosebumps, you tear up, sometimes you tremble, you raise your arms to the sky, sometimes you call out, or sometimes you just say, whoa, right? What else is you're left speechless? So this morning I want to remind us of experiences of awe. So if it feels comfortable, just close your eyes and let yourself wander, because what I always want you to go away with the practice. And so the practice is this is to spark you that you have already always experienced awe. So remember a time of light, candles wrapped in a holy glow, a fireworks display, the bright morning sun, sun rays on water, moonbeams seeping through your window. Remember a time of kindness. You took someone who was ill to the doctor. You listened without judgment. Someone cooked for you your favorite meal. Someone listened to you without judgment. Remember a time of joy, rising giggles, infectious laughs, private jokes that when you think of them, you immediately hold your side and explode into laughter. Recall an event that brought tears of elation to your glistening eyes. Remember a time of touch, the rough or smooth feel of a stone, the tickle of grass on bare feet, the sensation of sand between your toes, the hand that fits yours best, warm and long hugs, the memory of being held. Remember a time of wonder. Think of moments you never thought would happen, the miracle of forgiveness, prayers come true, dreams that became reality, gratitude for what has been and what has yet to be. Daydream, imagine. Remember that you are on the other side of things hoped for. Remember a time of weightlessness, the feel of waters that carries you. Call to mind the feel of the blustery wind. Imagine seeing 100 colorful hot balloons rising until all you see are spots of color in the sky, until your mind is tether free. And so that's the practice, my beloveds, to allow our minds to be tethered free. I love y'all so much. So grateful for all of you. So grateful to be here this morning. Amen.